Welcome to my podcast, and hope you guys, as usual, been taking care of your physical self, your mental selves, and obviously your essence. To get right into it, today I would like to really touch on a very important aspect of every single human being, and that, to my knowledge, at least every single human being possesses, and this is desire, be it desire to have numerous desires that we humans have, that every single one of us just have all sort of desires. But basically, any sort of desire that you want, may let it be maybe a certain car, certain house, certain situation, a certain sort of relationship. Probably we desire finances. Maybe you want to have a certain amount of money in the bank. So all sort of desires that every single one of us that have, and I'm going to touch on basically on fulfilling those desires, and why it's important to do so, but in a realistic, in a much more realistic manner. But the important thing to know is that desires, at least those that you harbor inside of you, should at least be maybe a majority of them, because there are plenty of desires that we possess as humans. Those important ones should be fulfilled. You run the risk. Plenty of us usually suppress desires, especially natural desires that we may have. It's very important that we try our best to fulfill these desires, because they're just simply part of who we are. We desire certain things for a reason. We desire them to fulfill what we want, what we'd like, the things that we would like to really experience, and these usually come in the form of desires. And so, as you can see, the desires that we have, each one of us know the sort of desires that we have. The desires that we have are there for a reason, and then that's why we should not really suppress these desires. It's very detrimental to us when we do so, because this is another reason a lot of people get stressed, a lot of people get confused, and really cannot concentrate and focus on the things that are apart from the desires, because our consciousness are seeking what is inside of us. And then when we try and do other things without fulfilling these desires that we have, these strong desires, then what happens is that we aren't able to really function well. And so this is a conscious thing, the desires, and if you're going to suppress them, then what you're doing is suppressing or maybe inviting a confused state. Yes, there's one thing that we usually have to do is really concentrate on other things besides our desires. But usually, as humans, we are supposed to experience things. We're supposed to go out there and get things that we want. And what we can do basically, or what we can do to to really help ourselves is probably not to suppress, but maybe to delay this sort of desires. And obviously, this will come back to us forming a sense of discipline, knowing that we cannot fulfill all our desires, first of all, but those things that we really feel that we need to fulfill them, then we can go after those things, right? So suppressing is the one thing that makes a lot of people really create a sense of confusion. They create a sense of unfulfillment. There's one thing not being able to fulfill your desires because they're out of reach. Then there's one thing totally suppressing them. Why? Because at times society sees us in a certain way. They do not, or we are not. We feel that if we do certain things, we'll be judged, right? If we have a certain lifestyle, we'll be judged, or we do a certain thing, we'll be judged, which is obviously understandable. But again, if that is detrimental to your health, especially your mental health, then what you're doing is just trying to fulfill or to please others, and then you are sparing your own life, or you are really sparing the feelings of others, and then putting others before you, so you aren't being able to be fulfilled, right? Those desires, in whatever form it may be, like the examples that I gave, you have to kind of work towards them. And once you work towards these desires, you grow as an individual. You grow to actually fill that void that we want, or we would like in our lives. There's certain things that in our lives that we want, but then we have to grow into them. And this is partly why desires are very important, because we have to grow into them and then adjust into that lifestyle, or that way of living that we want while fulfilling these desires. Now, I must mention that all desires must be fulfilled, depending on each and everyone's belief systems and also laws and principles that govern us, right? You can't, for example, as a married man or a married woman, want to fulfill your desires outside of your marriage. I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't or do this or that, but out of principles, and because you are now tied to someone that should fulfill maybe your sexual desires, right? Then you have to work with that person. And this is because you've taken a vow of that you too will be able to fulfill these desires, especially these sexual desires, maybe between you two. You see, so you can't now go outside of those norms and then try and fulfill your sexual desires outside of marriage, unless now you do extreme things and maybe separate and all that, divorce and all that. But you can see there are principles that you have to adhere to, and whenever you try and do things that you know have certain principles or within certain norms. So the gist of it is that as we try and fulfill, or we do those things that fulfill our desires or our inner needs, we should be aware of the consequences too. And there's another thing about most of us. We usually neglect that there are consequences that we should be able to face. So once we embark on certain things in whatever situation, we should know that there will be consequences to whatever action that we take. And now you can reason to yourself that, should I take this certain action? Should I do this thing? I think this is where a lot of people kind of get confused, because you want to feel certain things, you want to get certain things, but at times they're not just easily. You don't just fulfill them easily. So you usually come to a crossroad whereby you have to choose between doing what's right and doing what's wrong. And that's the paradox of the whole desire thing. You see, we all have desires, but how do we fulfill them? How do we get to them? How do we attract them? How do we do the things that we're supposed to do to fulfill these desires? But also, it's very important to try our level best to regulate these desires, because at times we may get to a situation where we're easily able to fulfill these desires. For example, you may work hard, you may work at your job, or be it that you're a businessman or a businesswoman or whatever. At the end of the day, you're successful and you do get, you may get the monetary rewards, or your finances become good, your finances become better than they were before. Now all of a sudden you've come towards your good finances, you've come towards success, you fulfilled a successful life, and you're better able to get the things that you desire. But there's regulation to that. You have to regulate them. You can't be too much of a consumer, because it's easy to fall into that trap of consuming more than you need. And this is why I said it's very important to regulate these desires. For example, if you're someone who probably is, let's say, someone who loves shopping, for example. I like shopping myself. And you get enough money to buy certain things that you've always desired. There should be a certain regulation that you do, a certain discipline that you have to form, because you'll find yourself becoming too much of a consumer. You will be too much of you indulge too much into things, and then this will kind of turn you into an addict of sort. What you'll be doing, it becomes sort of an impulse to now becoming a consumer. You just be, whenever you're able to get money, then your money is concentrated on fulfilling that certain desire, even beyond what you need. But regulating that is very important. Having discipline that you have more than you need, or you may have to delay certain things, is much more important, because you can't just be fulfilling a certain desires throughout. You need, for example, to sometimes back up on those desires and do other things, because our desires are usually tied to things, to tangible things, or just sensual things that fulfill us in a pleasurable way. And usual desires are usually connected to pleasure, and that's why pleasure is much more of a dopamine thing. If we're going to be fulfilling our dopamine over and over, we run the risk of really overriding our dopamine senses, and then we become addicts of that things, whether it's being a shopaholic, like the example I've taken, being an alcoholic, being a hypersexual. All those are fulfilled desires, but they're too much of an indulgence at the end of the day. So regulating them through discipline, through knowing yourself, through being conscious of your of these desires. It's very important to do so, because at the end of the day, you have to try and fulfill these desires, but at the end of the day, make sure you have enough discipline so that these desires of yours do not take over you and then try and control you. So controlling these desires is basically the most important thing that you can do. Otherwise, once you let your desires control you, then it will be hard for you to fulfill other aspects of your life or your lifestyle, because now you will be fulfilling nothing but the sensual, nothing but the tangible. And then life is not only about desires, by the way, though they are very important. We should try and adhere to them, but do not let them govern you. You should be able to govern them. We should, as individuals, be able to control and learn from them. And most of the time, if you find that you're unable to really control these desires, you're most probably getting further and further from your vision, from your goals, because a lot of the time, the best thing that will regulate these desires as your goals, because you know that you do not need to fulfill them, or you won't even have time to always be consuming or fulfilling these desires, because your goal and your vision will be taking you towards broader things, much more important or bigger things than these desires. Then these desires become just a reward as you go and move towards your goals, towards your vision. And don't get things wrong. Always try and fulfill these desires. Don't let guilt come in the way. Don't let shame come in the way. This is your life. This is who you are. This is what you desire, and you should know what the things you want, the things you desire, just as much as you should know that there are consequences to fulfilling these desires. However, do not let these control you and move you away from your goals, move you away from your mission and your vision, because your vision, your mission are larger than these desires that are basically usually short, cheap shots of dopamine. That's what they are. We do need them, because at least they do de-stress us. At times we're just stressed out. We're too much. We do too much work. We fulfill our goals and our vision. Then we need to relax and just allow ourselves to chill and let the dopamine and feel just the dopamine hits in us. But let's not be fooled by this dopamine and want always this hit of dopamine in our system. You fulfill them and then keep it moving. You go and right back and do what you intend to do, your work, your goals, your vision. This way you are better able to really balance out things, and then you're not consumed or controlled by your desires. Anyway, this has been Alfred, and thank you for listening to the Godcast here. And until next time, peace to the gods.